Hey everyone, it's Janice from the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm excited to tell you that my book is now for sale. It's called Divorcing Religion, a memoir and survival handbook, and I'll make sure you have a link in the notes for that. And also I want to encourage you to like, subscribe, and become a member of my YouTube channel. Take care. Hey everyone, welcome to the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm your host, Janice Selby. I'm a registered professional counselor and a religious trauma recovery coach. I want to start off by reminding you, get your tickets now for the Shameless Sexuality Life After Purity Culture Conference happening in Seattle this May. Go to shamelesssexuality.org. Now, my guest today is rock and roll musician Jeremy Tolly. Jeremy has sung on international stages, performed live before thousands of people, and produced award-winning records. Surprisingly, with all that success, he has also spent a lot of time feeling anxious and even ashamed of his voice. I invited Jeremy to join me today because he understands something that many of us who spent time in fundamentalist religious communities experience: shame, anxiety, and mistrusting our own voice. It can be hard for us to share our truth and express boundaries. Jeremy works with people who have deeply shut down voices, whose voices often became blocked starting in their childhoods. He understands the significance that parenting, school, and culture can have on our voices, and that to return a voice to health, we need to specifically address the expression aspects of these issues. You need a deep and sophisticated toolkit to heal and liberate a voice. This led Jeremy to develop the Radiant Voices material and methodologies that he teaches now, both as a private vocal transformation coach and in his signature course, Awaken Your Radiant Voice. The focus of Jeremy's work is to empower clients to go from not trusting their voice to feeling safe and confident about expressing their magic in the world. This information came straight from Jeremy's website. Welcome, Jeremy. I'm really glad to see you today.
Thank you so much, Janice, and hello, everyone out there in the world.
And you just were telling me that you're joining us right now from South Africa, so you live there part-time and also in Toronto, Canada, part-time. And I see that you have a guitar even hanging on the wall behind you. I'm very excited to know about your musical history and that work. I wonder, would you tell us as we start off, is religion something that has influenced your life in any way?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a kind of an interesting path of it. I was brought up in a pretty much atheist household in Toronto, and then at about 10 years old, moved across to South Africa, where I was kind of thrust into a church school, and I was pretty much religion clueless, and then encountered the kind of crazy paradoxes and lack of consistency and integrity of, let's just say, Christian national education in apartheid South Africa, where apparently God had mandated that apartheid was okay. And so let's just say I've had a kind of checkered career, or certainly a checkered introduction to religion. And then I think after that, I found my own more Gnostic, you could say, way of approaching things. I like to see myself as a bit more like the Red Cross from a spirituality point of view. I'm just here to support people. So I work with folk who are Muslim or Christian or atheists or spiritual or New Age or just whatever else it is. I have my own particular, let's call it flowering in all of this that I enjoy. But I'm really less interested in dogma, and I'm much more interested in our commonalities and our mutual humanity and deep empathy and mutual acceptance than I am about being right or anyone being right.
Beautiful, beautiful. I absolutely love that. So really, you work with humans and you do it in a beautifully human way, giving people space to be themselves and hold whatever beliefs they may hold. Thanks for sharing that with us. I'm curious also about, of course, music. Were your parents musical? When did music become a big part of your life?
It's quite strange because my parents are not musicians. They don't play, but my dad was a record collector and audiophile. And so there was always music around. And I just, at quite a young age, decided that was what I wanted to do, at least in part. And so I just ended up that being a significant portion of my life was writing and performing and producing. But there was always this other lane, you could say, in my life, which was about evolving a fascination with spirituality and consciousness and just what it is, like what is going on with this crazy human life that we've got, and a deep interest in trauma and healing. And so that really led me into studying to be a trauma facilitator and a coach. And for a long time, I did a lot of mentoring and working with trauma until it really began to focus much more clearly on what I'd call communication trauma, which is the shutting down of voices.
Right. Well, when we think of the trauma piece, so you moved to South Africa and were kind of thrust into a religious school situation there. I'm guessing you didn't know people. That in itself can leave us feeling traumatized when we make such a significant move. And as a child, of course, we have no say in what happens or where we go. And you mentioned apartheid in South Africa, and that was hugely traumatizing. Are those things that led to your interest in helping people who've experienced trauma?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be a component of it. I was just deeply fascinated in healing by the time I got into my mid-20s, I was having a confusing time in my 20s and not as much fun as I probably would have liked, and a deep curiosity. And so I just got onto what I'd call a healing path. And yeah, I got busy. And I can't remember what the rest of the question was.
Well, you answered. I was just wondering what led to your interest in trauma, and so part of it was the move and the situation in South Africa with apartheid. And at some point, so then you're also musical. Was your musical career taking off at that time in your 20s?
It was going okay, but in South Africa, it wasn't a brilliant way to survive and make money. So I've had another long and checkered career as an entrepreneur. So I got entrepreneurial quite quickly, yeah. But just a little side note about this thing about changing countries and cultural programming is I've ended up working with a lot of people that change countries. I've worked, we'll get on to, let's just say, religious fundamentalism. I've also worked with a lot of folks with those deep imprints traumatic imprints, let's just say, and it's interesting, you work with people with the specifically around the trauma of religious fundamentalism and overcoming the kind of conditioning, really deep conditioning that takes place in those environments. What I generally find, and is because I also work with a lot of psychotherapists and coaches who will come to me and they will have done a ton of work into particular traumas, but they won't necessarily have worked on this very specific dimension of it, which is what happened to my freedom of communication, my freedom of speaking in that enculturation or conditioning as a child, or in the church or in my family. And it's down to those micro decisions a child makes, which are, there's no space for my voice, or if I don't say exactly what everyone expects of me, I'm going to be punished and lose love. And so a child starts making internal decisions that it's not safe to speak, and they lose their voice in the process. And so it's a very specific thing then to unburden that inner child within us, if you like, from a psychological parts point of view, that is stuck kind of holding, like, I need to close this throat because otherwise we're going to get into trouble. And I'm going to just keep closing that throat. And there'll always be an anxiety response in me whenever I'm in an environment that triggers it. And until that closure is met, it's really there for life.
Oh, wow. And So you speak of it in terms of a lot of times it's things we do experience or how we interpret or misinterpret things in childhood because we have a limited knowledge base, of course. Um, a lot of work that I do with people assigned female at birth, and so they grew up in a fundamentalist home where females were considered less than. And so the female's job is to serve and to submit. And if we spent decades internalizing that and living that out, then when we finally are able to liberate ourselves, remove ourselves from that fundamentalist religious environment, then it can still feel so challenging. And, even for myself, when I was first exploring really being out on social media, and I was on Twitter at the time. I'm no longer, but I was at the time. And I thought, I wonder what it would be like to experience having people not know that I'm a woman because they look at me and they could see. But if I don't put my photo on my profile, and what if I make comments as certainly as a man would make them? So I'm not going to soften them up with emojis. I'm not going to do those sorts of things. So I did one profile that was me, that was my face, and typically how I, try and soften things up for people and just the way that I am. And then this other one, I really let myself post and respond as I thought a man would do. And people would comment. They'd be like, right on, brother, you got it, man. Like it was people. I had landed on the right space or something, but I just found that so so interesting for myself. And in some ways it felt really liberating, but it was just an interesting experiment to do. And even today, I know when I'm in situations with women and men, even leading my own conferences, because I run these conferences, my go-to feeling can be to defer, to let the man speak first because of the conditioning that I went through. And I sometimes feel like I'm fighting against that in order just to say what I want to say or what I need to say. And I don't know that others would even recognize that struggle going on, but I'm aware of it for me. So that's why I was so interested in having you on, because there can be a lot of, it can be difficult for people coming out of religious circles to find their voice and feel comfortable expressing it.
Oh, yeah, thank you. That was such a rich share. First of all, just to reflect back that I love your strategy, your deconditioning strategy of like make up an avatar, explore this other voice to discover what it feels like, and then you can reintegrate it back once you learn it and feel safe enough. But you've kind of done it anonymously. Honestly, I think that's genius. I'm sure I'll tell someone to do that or offer that to someone in the future if you don't mind. It was fun. Yeah, and it's really interesting. There's so many patterns to talk about, reflecting on what you're saying there. Like I work with a lot of women leaders, and there's huge amounts of deconditioning to do and searching to find a powerful voice that doesn't result or that feels comfortable. And there is enormous conditioning that says that that as a woman, you're not allowed to be powerful, or if you're being powerful, you're shrieking. There'll be a million projections and layers put on top of having a powerful female voice, and yeah, trace straight back to original childhood conditioning. And so finding a way of that feels authentic to oneself and overcoming that conditioning is work. It's real work. And I feel really privileged to have been allowed to support a lot of women with that without necessarily having gone through that exact thing myself. But I have a deep amount of empathy, let's just say, for it. It's really It's tough conditioning. There's a lot of patriarchy that preceded this exact moment on planet Earth.
Oh, that's the truth. And I even feel like sometimes we gaslight ourselves, or trying to make ourselves still act out that conditioning that we've internalized, even though we don't necessarily have to. And I think that's the part of the scar of the patriarchy for sure. So do you have, is it mainly women? Do you think it's 50-50? What type of folks would seek out your services? Musicians too, I imagine.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so I work with, I would say, probably 60-40 female to male. From many different cultures, literally from Bangladesh and India to the US, Canada, Ireland, UK, South Africa, and so on. A broad mix. I often work with leaders, but I also work with people who basically I've got a bit of a freeze response inside. I work with high anxiety speakers, let's just say speakers and singers, high anxiety performers, high anxiety public speakers, but I also work with people who've got the same type of wound, but it expresses as a fear of visibility. So in other words, a fear of taking up space, fear of marketing themselves, a kind of pervasive, what I'd call like fear of them out there, which can develop just from bullying, for example, or I've seen this many times if I've got a client who's from a fundamentalist background, where the family's fundamentalist, and so then they get isolated culturally isolated at adolescence. There's a huge amount of shame. They feel other and less than, and potentially there's some judgment or teasing from not fundamentalist kids, and so they develop a pervasive fear of being around groups of people because school was traumatizing, never mind their family environment that was traumatizing too. So there's like this double whammy of my family was weird enough and told me that I didn't have a voice. But then when I went to school, I was the odd one out and the weirdo, and, from the whichever particular slightly culty community, fundamentalist community. And so that will then result in an adult who will stand up and want to be a manager, but they will go into a freeze response when they need to speak. Their body will shake, they'll sweat, they'll blush, they will lose their words, their prefrontal cortex will go offline, so they'll forget what they're saying. Doing that PowerPoint presentation is an absolute nightmare to them. They spend weeks preparing for it. They agonize and dread, and then they are a puddle of shame after doing it. It's like a nasty pattern. So those are my people, is people who have that stuff.
Wow. I am certain there'll be a lot of people who are listening or watching our conversation who can really relate to that, because of course public speaking is rated as one of the highest of fears. It can really induce anxiety for people for the different reasons that you have mentioned. So I'm wondering, at some point you recognized in yourself that you were having your body was reacting in certain situations when you were performing. You're performing around the world, and were you performing with other bands? Like you were in the studio doing musical work, or was it your own band?
Yeah, so I had multiple bands, but I had a particular band that was quite famous-ish in the mid-2000s in South Africa. But the kind of lead-in prior to that is that I'd really developed quite a significant freeze response in certain social environments where it was like my brain would go offline. I would say stupid stuff. I'd be kind of introvert, extrovert. I'd kind of get a bit of a buzz of energy, but then start losing myself in a group environment, then start freezing, then say stupid stuff, then go into weeks of self-recrimination after being a social fool. And so, it's really was that was kind of part of the genesis of it. And one of the deeper things that I found in my system, having discovered this work, let's just say, and having done a lot of it on myself and then worked with others, is that it took a lot of work for me to find a belief system underneath, deep in my being, you could say, that I was unlikable, that people didn't like me. I didn't know that was there. And it was just somehow a belief system got lodged in there in my adolescence, let's just say, and that there was something wrong with me, or even prior to that, long prior to that. And so rooting that out was really core to arriving to be able to almost be kind of innocently be able to arrive in a group environment and just be like, okay, y'all can do what you do, but I'm just going to be me. And I, don't need to freeze anymore. But it took quite a bit of work to clear that response, let's just say.
Wow. And so then at some point you recognize that other people maybe were experiencing similar things. And you were big in the music industry, so potentially, I don't know, able to recognize it in other musicians. And then at some point you developed your program, and now you help people coming to you from all sorts of different backgrounds, not just for music. How long does your program last? And do people do it online? Do they come to you in person?
Yeah, so I work online with folk on Zoom, and a lot of my work is coaching, but I have various programs, online programs, and PDFs and all kinds of things to learn the methodology. I love doing the coaching. It's really direct and it's quick. It's remarkable actually how quickly you can turn this conditioning around. I've got some, let's just say, sneaky methods. Like I'll demonstrate in a moment if we get to it, how it works, and even what I'm doing on this call, like the techniques that I'm employing on this call to ground myself, center myself, to access perspective and just grounded self. Because it's kind of weird. Like, we've just met, we're having a wonderful conversation here, but like we're talking. Soon enough, this will be on the internet. What's normal and natural about that? Absolutely nothing. So how do you access grounded, centered calm when you need to, kind of on tap? And that's what I'm really, really curious about. And I believe that and I trust and I know from doing the work a lot that it's possible to shift and do in the moment and to create kind of little miracles, let's just say. Like I'm just being a little playful in this exact moment. I'm slowing things down on purpose. I'm just slightly slowing things down. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll also it was a 4-second pause. And so 4-second pauses are amazing in public speaking. They create this gap where everyone moves in and everyone kind of switches on. I mean, anyone who watches this on YouTube or listening on the podcast, please leave a comment and ask how the gap felt for you. What happened? Did you leave, or did you bring your awareness and attention here? Anyway, sorry, I just got totally distracted and playful there for a moment. Where were we, Janice?
Right. That's so great. And even, if people check in around how they felt when there was that silent 4 seconds, because you were giving us a lovely pregnant pause there. And some of us have been taught so much that we have to be caretakers of other people all the time. We can't abide any silence. We have to rush in and fill that gap. And that's something important for us to be aware of, because that's also when we might be inclined to say things that don't need to be said, regrettable things. If we feel like we have to say something, it's okay to be quiet. It's okay to be silent. Lots can happen in that space, whether you're the one that's leaving the silence or whether you're the person that's the recipient on the other end of it. I just think that is so fun and clever. Very good.
Just playing a little bit, but yeah, sometimes in my work I'll go into the classic, what would be called defense responses, when we feel a little bit triggered. And so, the audience could ask themselves, and we could play with this for a moment. When you're a bit triggered and difficult things are happening, will you tend towards what would be called your fight response? You'll be kind of quite quickly defensive or a fighter, or will you tend towards a flight response? In other words, I need to get out of the room, get out of the conversation, get out of the relationship, kind of just leave the building. Are you a freezer? Nothing comes out. you just kind of freeze when there's conflict, or, and this is really going back to what you were saying, are you a pleaser, also known as the fawn response? So in other words, placating, pleasing, looking after people, saying whatever needs to be said to downregulate and soothe the environment to make things safe or to please the other. Tell me, what is your combo of responses that you tend to?
Yeah, that's such a great question. When I was growing up, my dad was quite volatile. And so even today, if I'm in a public space and someone is yelling nearby, I'm looking for an exit for my own safety. That comes up that for me sometimes. But it might, just depend on if I know the other person or the situation, or if it strikes me as funny, if it's something I can just kind of laugh off, or if it's something that's really serious. But definitely at times, I think I've probably done all of them. Trying to also growing up in a volatile home, learned very quickly to read the atmosphere in the room and determine if I was safe. If I'm not safe, what do I need to do? Can I tell a story to distract? Are there words or actions I can take that would, almost supplicate? And so the person isn't going to view me as a threat. There are all sorts of things that come up for me. What was it for you? Or what has it been?
Yeah, mostly a combination of flight, freeze, and fawn, please, like just a real combination of those, but a whole lot of pleaser, let's just say. Yeah.
It takes a lot to get me into fight response because that is so far removed from my conditioning. But that also has been activated at times and surprised me. And so that typically would have been if I felt there was a danger to my child, or if I saw an injustice going on. So a few months ago with my partner, we're walking through a parking lot to get to a little grocery store. And I saw a child, probably looked maybe 10 or 12. And there were 4 other kids on bikes, and they were harassing the child. And the kid was just trying to walk away, and the kids were bullying and jeering. And I felt that they were being quite threatening. So I just walked right over to the young person and said, do you need a hand? How are you doing? Do you want to just come into the store with me here? And so just kind of dealt with things that way. But I was so angry at the other children who were inflicting this pain. And when the kid wasn't even sure what to do, I started speaking directly to the kids who were causing the trouble. That shocked my husband because that was quite a forward, I guess, thing to do. But what are you going to do when you see a kid in danger? You want to step in. But that, I feel like that's rare compared to some of the other responses. Wow. You're making me think some deep things.
No, bless you for doing that. That's beautiful. Doing this work, I've realized that having a healthy fight response is really important. And so kind of undomesticating because my fight response got domesticated out of me, if you like, and undomesticating it and allowing myself appropriately to express what I call healthy anger and to have clear boundaries, I think is absolutely essential for our mental and emotional well-being. So that was a kind of a journey of discovery for me of really reestablishing clear boundaries.
Yes. I was speaking with a woman the other day who had come out of fundamentalism and really has a hard time voicing any sort of boundaries or anger, even in situations where boundaries have obviously been violated, and anger might be a more predictable reaction or response. And I asked her if she would consider attending some self-defense classes, because in that situation, women are encouraged to use their voice, to scream. And I thought maybe because it's so
Yes.
far out of the ordinary for her, maybe that would at least be a crack that she could open to let that voice out. I don't know. I didn't know about you then. Now I would
No, but
say
that's a
to look
really,
this up.
well, let me tell you, it's a really good suggestion. So polyvagal theory being modern nervous system theory, we have our freeze response, which is when we shut down. Then we have fight or flight, and then we have this beautiful place called our ventral vagal nervous system, which is where we feel comfortable and we can speak and so on. People develop freezes in their communication system, and it sounds like she'd be one of those who would kind of essentially just clam up and shut up. And one of the things that's beautiful to understand about a freeze response in our system is that to recover out of a freeze, because a freeze is immobilized, my voice is immobilized or I'm immobilized, we need to switch on mobilization. And usually to get back to a space of having a healthy nervous system and a healthy voice, we have to sometimes go through fight or flight. We have to remobilize out of the freeze to get back to a comfortable place. So the moment you tell me that you're sending her to go to karate, where she'll fight and she'll get her voice out like that intuitively, that's a really powerful way of activating a frozen voice.
Wow.
So you're spot on.
Thank you. Yes. So are those types of things that you do with your clients? Like, how much do you go into their past, or are interested in rooting out what's the issue, what happened in childhood? Or are you just asking them, do you remember a time in childhood when you wanted to speak but you couldn't speak? Do you take them that far back?
We do go back, yeah, but we actually immediately start with what I would in this moment term the great pattern interrupt. So I'm going to share that with you just because I'm doing it, and let's do it. So what happens is when a system, I'm going to call it a dysregulated communication system. In other words, a system that's freezing, or maybe it's too much is coming out, or too little is coming out. That it would be a piece of conditioning that just comes over. You walk into the family dinner table, and your family dinner table was traumatizing. So instantly this conditioning just comes over of dysregulation and discomfort. Or you stand up to public speak in front of your community or whatever it is, and the whole system seizes up. This is conditioning, right? So how do we switch that conditioning in a matter of moments? I'm going to show you. So what we're going to do, well, I'll explain why we're going to do it in a moment. We're going to cross our hands over like this. So, and now just for the moment, play with me and just tap slowly left and right. Now take your hands down, just keep tapping and put them onto your legs. But crossed over like that. So crossed over, but do it in a way that you don't look hunched, because I want you to be able to do this on a Zoom call and look. So you're doing this completely slyly. Now tap your legs left and right. I'd like you to start breathing slowly, perhaps even doing box breathing, counting in for 4 and breathing, but with your eyes open, like you're being completely stealthy. You could do this at a dinner table when uncle is triggering or whatever else it is. And I want you to try and bring, it's going to sound a little strange, but I want you to bring as much of your awareness in, and everyone that's listening to this, do the same thing. Bring as much awareness as you're capable of into the sensations in your lower body. I mean, feel your feet, your thighs. In our case, there are butts in the seat and legs and knees. But I want you might need to close your eyes to find that sensation. But if you can find it with your eyes open, that's the prize. Because, you'd just be sitting at the dinner table, but you're bringing all this awareness out of a head that might be spinning, thinking, what do I need to do? Oh, damn, it's happening again. I want you to bring as much awareness down into the lower body as possible while breathing. So I've been doing this throughout the call, on and off. And so I'm inviting you, Janice, right now just to do that. So in other words, like, let go of even needing to think about my words, just bring awareness down into the body. And like you've moved into deep, deep self-soothing. Even though you're around other people or around me, and we're around the internet right now, I'd ask you to move into like 75% nervous system regulation and self-soothing, bringing awareness down and breathing, almost like you're this island, this island of I'm at home inside myself. Everyone else can worry about themselves. I'm going to just be in here.
Wow.
And so you do that in a meeting waiting for your turn to speak. You do that at the dinner table. And your object would be to, because otherwise you're going to be in the hypervigilant system, looking at everyone, totally watching it like it's very hectic TV, into, I'm going to move into me. I'm going to soothe me. And then just, if I can regulate this nervous system till I feel calm, then we'll see how the rest of the interaction goes. Okay, so what happened so far with just playing with that?
I thought it's interesting. I was wondering about the tapping. The minute you said, bring your focus to the lower body, that made so much sense. That in itself was calming. I could feel just kind of getting out of my head where it's all noisy and monkey mind and all that going on, to actually focus on, oh yeah, my feet are on the floor. The chair is supporting me. I'm curious about the crossing of the hands. Why do we do that?
Yeah, good question. And it was just a technique that I developed from 2019 onwards, where I was looking for a way of bringing awareness down, but I also wanted to try and get or make it possible to process the moment, to kind of process what's going on. And so we know that in techniques like EMDR, for example, bilateral stimulation between the left and right hemisphere is used. So even this is a shorthand used in EMDR, but simultaneously other techniques like brain gym and many others use this kind of left-right crossing. There's like sun-moon breathing in both, or left-right nostril breathing in yogic and Taoist traditions. There are many different traditions. So one of the things that I discovered doing this work was that a person can have their heart beating. They can start to be blushing. They can start sweating. They can be overthinking. And their body can be moving into an anxiety pattern. But if they bring their awareness down into the lower body where they're tapping and their legs are, they will find that bizarrely, simultaneously with having a triggered upper body, they can most often find a calm lower body. Calm, neutral, grounded, heavy, just they're my legs. Triggered above, grounded below.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Can I offer you one bit of feedback, and you wouldn't have any reason to, I guess, be aware of this, but I will say, as a larger bodied person, and especially with a heavier chest, crossing the hands can feel difficult, can be hard for me to do that when it's, if I'm tapping on my legs. If I just have my hands regularly tapping on my legs without crossing them, do you think it would have the same effect?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. In fact, like almost immediately after I've taught the first thing, we then move on to just having the hands there, or even just moving the feet like inside, just like this, almost just like, or moving the legs like this, but it's this thing about bringing awareness down in this left-right movement. I like to have all of these options. Sometimes with crossing the hands like this, it can help to just put them forward on the knees a little bit like that. But and not necessarily fully crossed over, just even like this, works. But yeah, equally beautiful if you're doing your feet like that. All of the above work, but the fundamental thing is remember I described it as the great pattern interrupt. This will be, I'm hypervigilant, I'm at the table, people are starting to argue already, my heart is beating, or let's just say I'm waiting for my turn, I'm at a workshop and everyone's sharing, and there'll be, you're going to be running your at the conference soon. Mm-hmm. If they're sharing circles, there'll be 30 to 50% of the people will be terrified to share in that circle and will be going into an anxiety response waiting for their turn. And so to then offer a way that they can regulate their nervous systems while waiting for their turn, and so that instead of watching everyone else share, trying to pre-think, what am I going to say, which is also part of the anxiety response, it's an invitation to slow down, ground, find a kind of a core or a center, and get out of a deep, as much as possible, out of a deep anxiety response.
So powerful. I think nowadays it's almost people, it's common to hear young people, even in their 20s or in their teens, talk about my anxiety, I have anxiety, I have, anxiety attack or generalized anxiety disorder. We really need these tools that can help us to be grounded and to stay present. And sometimes in the course of a day, stressful things, surprising things are going to come up. But what we want is to be able to kind of access our resilience as easily as possible or as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. So it just, something might, knock us over, but it doesn't have to keep us down. We're able to get back up and continue, especially if you're talking about performing. Oh my gosh, if you're up on the stage there and then you start having anxiety symptoms, that can be pretty serious. And if it's the way you earn your living, then there's even added stress on that. Wow. That's big.
Hugely so. Mm-hmm. Hugely so.
Did you have that happen when you were on stage sometimes, or would you be able to hold it together and then you'd get off and you'd kind of be a puddle?
So by the time I got performing, I dealt with large parts of the freeze response, but I still had, look, it was still scary. When I first got up in front of 20, 25,000 people, there's just like no way that your throat doesn't close. And then you're trying to sing through an instrument that sounds a little bit like this. It's not comfortable. Oh. And and definitely depending on how that performance was going, could start shutting down and judging the performance while I'm doing it. But definitely big patterns of what I now like to call in my work the shame hangover afterwards of, shame, self-judgment, recrimination, that wasn't good enough, which so many people do, experience after performing, after singing, after speaking in a group. Oh, I spoke too much. I did this, I did that, or leading a meeting, never good enough. It would be very easy if I was in my old pattern to watch this podcast afterwards and microanalyze. Oh, what did I do? Was I grounded enough there? Was I this? And I really I've really learned that to have a voice in this world is a tremendously messy affair, and to love that just showing up and just bravely putting it out there, it is the act, and it's to be celebrated and supported, and it's what I love to help other people do too, is to be their beautiful, messy human selves out in the world rather than hiding that beautiful diamond at home.
Right. Yes. My husband is 22 years older than I am, and so he has a lot more birthdays and a lot of experiences. And one thing that he says about life, he says, suit up, show up, fuck up, fess up. Like that's just been, lather, rinse, repeat. We're not going to get so sidelined, even if we've really made a mess of things. We're going to learn from it as best we can, and then apply that knowledge moving forward. So how do you help people if they are kind of stuck in that shame and self-recrimination loop. What do you do for them?
Yeah, so there's a whole component of this, which is what I would call, hopefully it's not too jargony, deconditioning and processing.
Mhm.
In other words, stuff happens and inside us, and instead of just letting it happen, we deal with it. So an example would be you speak at the family dinner, you get up and sing a song at church, whatever else it is, and then the shame hangover arises afterwards, right? Or you post that social media post where you've been on video, and afterwards there's this like, they're going to attack me, something bad's going to happen. Usually what would happen is we'd be filled with really unpleasant feelings and thoughts, self-recriminating, self-judging, self-critical thoughts. Often we would even we'd imagine other people judging us, what other people thought, but it's really us judging us. But we like export our shame. That can somebody else judge me, but it was actually us. And all of that pretty much happens subconsciously. We'll be going about our business cleaning, and there'll be this narrative and this horrible feeling. Maybe we'll lie around and feel crappy for an hour or two. But what we want to do is this is just an example of the deconditioning, is like get to know it intimately, write down all the words that go on in our heads, note all of the body sensations and the feeling. I like working with EFT tapping. It's just a method. And then we process those and we bring those hidden like negative thoughts into the light, you could say, so that they're completely exposed. Oh my gosh, my mind is telling me I'm useless. I should never do this again, that I'm horrible. And when we see those thoughts really and we process them, I like EFT, EMDR is good. There are many different ways to approach this, but so that we're not just processing it cognitively, but we're also involving the body at some level. And usually what happens is as soon as we deeply process it, there's this recognition of like, oh my gosh, these voices are brutal. They're lying to me. They're even delusional, these voices, and they're deeply destructive. But when they're stared at and seen deeply, then they begin to unwind and dissolve. Simultaneously, though, we do that of deeply working on the negative. Then what we do is we begin to choose positive belief systems. Like after you did that public speech and it went okay, but you froze a little bit in the middle and you weren't perfect and you went into the shame spiral, you process the negative side, and then you ask yourself, well, what would I like to feel about this? Dang, I'm brave. Like, and I love and support myself, and I'm on a big journey, and I'm going to get better, but right now I'm good enough for me, and I'm so proud of how far I've come, and, I freeze because of childhood trauma, and I forgive myself. This wasn't my fault. This happened to me as a kid. I flood myself with empathy for everything I've been through. And I recognize how brave I needed to be just to be on that stage or just to show up or just to open my voice. And I'm going to keep backing myself. And I choose to love and accept myself on this wild and beautiful journey. And I choose to let myself be imperfect and have a voice in this world. So does that make sense? Like,
yes, it sounds like reparenting going on there, which I just love. And it reminds me of a weekend event that I attended years ago. And it was all adults who were there, maybe from age 25 to 75. And they were sharing some difficult things that had happened. And one of the exercises at the end was people they had two rows, and then you are in the middle and you have your arms crossed over you. So your hands are, touching your shoulders. And then you're gently guided towards one person, and they whisper in your ear something that they like about you. And then they kind of gently push you over to the other person. By the time we got through that lineup, everyone was crying because it was so incredible to just walk through a group of people and have them all say things directly to you that they like about you, that they like about your character or the way you do something. Or it was so powerful. And so when you talk about flooding yourself with empathy. That's it. It's like this huge warm hug, very accepting and loving and understanding. And that's also, part of the reparenting piece. So I'm so glad that you work with clients, teaching them how they can do that for themselves, because it doesn't matter how good we are at something, sometimes we'll drop the ball. That's just part of being human. And that's okay. So we're going to learn to get going again right after that happens. Yes. What were you going to say?
No, not at all. Thank you. It was such a beautiful story, and I loved the reparenting story. It was just, yeah, that's gorgeous. And I think that's the thing, is that sadly but truly, I think a lot of us, or maybe most of us, are trained into negativity and self-judgment. We aren't trained to love and accept ourselves and appreciate ourselves and cheer ourselves on. We're trained towards perfectionism and self-judgment and self-criticism and so on. So to genuinely enjoy life and be playful in the world requires us to kind of reprogram almost the human condition. Because I think also our neocortex and our brain system, I could suggest that it works like this, is a problem solver. So it's inherently looking for the problems. So to live a life where we liberate that mechanism to some degree and replace that inherent something's wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong, as the default mode network switches in every 8 seconds looking to solve a problem in our brains, and to switch it over into a kind of a celebration of life and you go, kiddo, you can do this, you can get up on that stage, you can dance like a fool, you don't have to be perfect, you can be a kind of a squishy, real human being, and that's enough. And to do that, I think is like, I think Scott Peck said, a road less traveled, but I think it's the most beautiful thing we can do, is to reparent ourselves into a positive self-regard where we give ourselves permission to drop our standards almost completely, so we can playfully just try things like a kind of a child artist in the world and express ourselves and hopefully contribute positively to the world and share some goodness and some kindness.
Oh, yes. Wow. The feeling that I get from you is one of safety. I feel safe in your presence. And I think that can be conveyed so beautifully to your clients. And once we feel safe, and not until we feel safe, can we really start to get curious about things. And we know fear closes us down, curiosity opens us up. So you're providing this platform, this atmosphere of safety for them, where they can get curious, and then they can develop some courage out of that to try new things. And I think that's just one of the best gifts that we can give to our clients. So thank you.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, I think that safety word is really key. I'd like to say that I think it's our birthright to feel safe inside ourselves around other humans. And remember that polyvagal theory I was saying, there's like this freeze up here, then there's fight or flight down here. Then down here is this nervous system called our ventral vagal. It's literally, it's our ventral vagal nervous system. And when we are in it, it's a state we all know. It's where we feel in some places of our lives where we feel grounded and comfortable and compassionate and connected to each other and open and curious and loving. We all know it's in some places in our lives. It's my belief. And sorry, the one other word you'd say about the ventral vagal nervous system is safety. It's where we just feel safe to interact with humanity and the world. And it's in our nervous system. And so, if you like, part of this work is to support people to enter this ventral vagal nervous system state when they're on the internet, when they're in a Zoom meeting, when they're presenting their ideas, when they get up on stage to sing, when they're in that workshop and it's time to share, when they want to talk to their family about something important, that they have a way of like dropping into a deep inner safety. Because maybe a really beautiful thing about ventral vagal is that we have our mirror neurons, which mean that we read each other all the time, and our nervous systems read each other all the time. And people in ventral vagal help other people enter ventral vagal. People who are in safety, and you know this from your work as a therapist, is when you sit deeply in your being, your safety helps your clients feel safe. And I think it's one of the most beautiful gifts we can offer is to regularly, deliberately enter states of safety. I was tapping earlier to do the same thing in order to, first of all, feel safe inside ourselves, but then to offer that gift to other people by feeling like that around them so that they can feel the same.
Oh, yes. Wow. Yeah, that whole co-regulation piece, I think, is a really big one. Jeremy, it has been such a delight to speak with you today and get to know you a little bit. Can people find you and find your resources?
Yeah, so the easiest way is jeremytolly.com and Jeremy de Tolly on Instagram. Those are the two easiest, and Jeremy de Tolly on YouTube. So I'm just out there on the internet under my name. And I just want to say a huge thank you. It's been such a lovely talk. It's been lovely connecting with you. It's just been really lovely chatting.
Thank you. I feel the same. I hope that our paths will cross again. And I want to thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you learned something from our show today. I know I did. Please take care. We'll see you all again soon.